plan ahead, and be honest with themselves. Does that count as one bit of advice? Probably three.
If you were sitting in front of somebody now who's potentially going to invest in a franchise business and you're only allowed to give them one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say that they need to plan ahead. Do as much research as they can, plan ahead, and be honest with themselves. Does that count as one bit of advice? Probably three. You know, it's a challenge for most people. So be prepared. Be prepared.
Yeah. So, Doug Parks, welcome to the Disenfranchised. How are you doing today?
Hi Ed, thanks for having me. I'm very well actually. It's been a busy day, so no complaints.
Good, good. And when you say a busy day, is that sat at the desk and going through emails, calls of clients? What's the day look like at the moment?
It's been 2 or 3 viewings, a market appraisal, stuffing hundreds of letters and things that I've done. So lots of different stuff today, which is good. Best part of the job, not really being stuck to one place all the time.
Yeah, nice bit of variety, and it's the spice of life, right? So
Definitely.
that's good. But we'll get into that in a moment, I guess. But before we do, I'd like to start at the same place I start with everyone, really, and that is, I'd love to find out, what was your first job?
My first job when I left school was as an apprentice electrician. Which I went into because my father was an electrician, and I just followed him into the trade, really. Spent quite a few years in the construction industry. I hated being an electrician, and then moved to...
I was going to ask you, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoyed parts of it. I mean, some of the fun and the characters on building sites were some fun times, but I didn't really like the job. I had a couple of other jobs on sites with regards to pipe fitting, welding, that sort of thing. So I picked up quite a few skills, but it was always something that I never ever thought this was me. This was my career till I'm 60, sort of thing. It was a job, and that was about it at the time. Really, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I was one of those people at school that I love sport, but just never really knew what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine wanted to be a fighter pilot in the American Air Force, and that's what he ended up doing, actually. So,
Oh wow,
I just didn't
good
know
on
what I
him, yeah.
wanted to do.
Yeah, I can relate to that totally. I mean, for myself, yeah, I remember some other people around me wanted to be policemen and whatever else they wanted to do, and I was sitting there going, well, I'm fairly good at art and football and maths. What job does that make, and do I want to do it? I don't know. And you kind of fall into a job. For me, it was putting up marquees for a living, and
Wow.
so I kind of fell into it and did that for a while. I guess at least you kind of you got yourself into a trade, which is a good start. But where did your career take you then after that? You said you spent some time in the construction industry.
Yeah, I was in the construction industry up until 1995, and it was sort of a funny time. We'd had, I think, a few downturns for the building industry, and it sort of started to get a little bit difficult. And then I had a close friend of mine died when we were out one evening, and it just sort of gave me a bit of a new perspective, really. And I then ended up a few months later going off round the world for a year, spending most of the time in Australia, and sort of came back in June '96 and got into the world of mortgages really. So it was quite a change for me. I came back from Australia and met a chap who said, look, you know, everyone's crying out for mortgages at the time, and it's a good job, give it a go. So I had some interviews with a few different companies and ended up working at an estate agent's in Walton-on-Thames as a mortgage advisor. And that was my first sort of start in the property industry.
Yeah, wow. It's an interesting transition, isn't it? Because I guess although it's buildings is probably the closest connection between those two roles, really. It's completely different, isn't it? Because really you're looking at numbers. There's a bit more sales involved than kind of the more delivery side, which you consider as an electrician or pipe fitter or something like this, right? So
Yeah, it was an
how did you
interesting.
find that transition?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I think as you get older, you get to realize what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. And when I was on the construction industry, when I was in that, if you were on building sites, there was sort of nobody there. You just got on with the job and that was it. But then when I started to do a few other jobs at people's houses and that sort of thing, um, it actually was pleasing to do a job and see the homeowner there and then be appreciative of what you've done and that feeling of helping people. So I think when I moved into
Yeah.
the property world, to sit down with people, and which is normally quite a stressful thing, trying to get a mortgage and this, that, and the other, and seeing how I helped those people through what is usually quite a stressful time gave me a lot of job satisfaction. So it was quite interesting how that came about. And a lot of the time, I speak to so many people now, and it is little things like that that you get to realize what you like, what you enjoy about a job. Um, and that's certainly a big thing for me, is having that ability to help people and see that it makes the job worthwhile.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting piece, actually, isn't it? Really, that it's not always about the tasks that you're doing. It's the how you're interacting with people and helping them that probably is a driver for a lot of us at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
The driver for me is all about helping to educate people on franchising. So yeah, I can definitely see why that makes a lot of sense, and how that transition is kind of made easier, because you've got that kind of core spine of the bit that you enjoy there, and the rest of it you can kind of learn and take forward. So how long were you a mortgage advisor for?
I started in 1997 for the company, working out of an estate agency branch, and then I became a sort of mini assistant manager, if you like, and helped manage a couple of brokers. And then in 2002, I started my own mortgage company, mortgage advice
Okay.
company, and that was a lot of fun as well. I found an estate agent, a little independent, who allowed me to go and work from their office and provide their clients with mortgage advice. And luckily enough, over the years, the 5 years that I'd worked in the estate agency branch, I'd built a lot of contacts, a lot of people that kept coming back to me. And so they helped me generate the business, if you like, for that first foray as a self-employed worker. And the part of that that was nice was actually, it was sort of flexi time, really. I used to spend a lot of evenings going to people's houses, sitting down with them. They're comfortable in their own home, and and ultimately that a lot of those people became friends, not just clients. And you know, unfortunately, a lot of
That's
it was
cool.
divorce cases, and they're trying to split the mortgage and bits and pieces. So again, it's back to that thing about helping people, um, and I really enjoyed
Like
it.
you say,
And
it's a really stressful time.
yeah, it is. And
Like you say, it's a really stressful time.
yeah,
Not only because of the the, the kind of hurdles that typically get thrown up when you're trying to move. You know, whether it's a delay in the removal van, or there's all sorts of things.
yeah,
I'm not going to bring up the one that really got me, but yeah, you've got that. But also, there's stuff going in people's personal lives, which is the reason why they're moving as well, which can be stressful. So there's not
yeah,
many other things that stress people out as much as a house move. So yeah, I can see how taking away one of the stresses, raising the capital, getting the mortgage together.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it must be a relief for a lot of the people that
Well,
you worked with.
Ed, it was interesting actually, because in that sort of environment, when you're there at sort of 8 o'clock at night, sat down with somebody in their own home, you you probably get told a hell of a lot more than you would ever get told. You're delving deep into people's finances, what credit card debt they have, and loans, and what they're worried about and concerned about. And
Yeah,
it was, sometimes you sort of felt like a bit of a counselor, but to a degree, that's what some of these people needed. They needed someone to show them the right way, and that there was an option that was available to them. And it was a
yeah,
I enjoy that side of the job.
yeah. No, that's really cool. So, how long did you have the business for?
So we started it in 2002, and then I got up to 2007. The market was crazy, and then obviously 2008 we hit the great financial crash. And so I had it for 6 years. I had a couple of people working for me, and it was just starting to get bigger. And obviously the financial crash happened, and it was a tough time. I had bills to pay, and I moved house myself in 2006 to a property that needed a hell of a lot of work and everything. So it was a really tough time then to know what my what I needed to do to carry on earning money, because the as you know, the market just basically shut down for a while, and prices were plummeting, and mortgage deals were just pretty non-existent for a lot of people, affordable mortgage
Yeah,
deals. But you learn a lot of lessons, and you pick yourself up, move on, and that's when I moved over to the actual estate agency side in 2000 and end of 2009. And we were sort of looking at bottoming out then, and people were coming in and buying properties that were really knocked down in price. And um, I just thought, well, let's just go into the selling houses side and see what we can do.
I guess there was a real opportunity for you at that point, right? And was that part of the decision to transition into property, into selling the properties, or
Yeah, I was,
was it more by chance?
I had no, I had two children in private school and things, so the bills were pretty high. So I needed something that was going to get me money pretty quickly. The business was a struggle to the mortgage broking business was a struggle to wind that up and deal with the cases that I had and everything else. But I knew a chap. I used to work with a chap whose mortgages I was doing, and he was a manager of an estate agency branch, and said to me, "Well, look, come and work for us, and we've got a spot, and let's see how you go." And that was at the end of 2009. So yeah, sold my first house as an estate agent at the end of 2009.
Excellent. Do you remember where it was and what it looked like?
I do remember where it was actually. It was a house that had been on their books for many, many months, and the other staff used to moan about it because it backed onto an industrial estate. But I don't know. It's same as anything. You get into a job, you just start ringing everybody, and we sold it within about 6 weeks. And it's probably mindset. You tell yourself you can't sell this or you can't do that. You probably won't. But no, it was a fantastic time, because although I worked really hard there, long hours. But 2010 was a really good year. We'd come out of that horrible period of the financial crash. People were starting to see light at the end of the tunnel, and 2010 started to take off. And the company that I worked for were part of the biggest network in the country, and our brand had about 40 offices. And 2010, I ended up being the top agent in the 40 offices, which was excellent. And then
cool.
Another company, literally 30, 40 yards up the road, offered me a job, more money and everything else. And I decided to make the move to them. And that was at the end of 2010. So it was a hectic year, but it worked out very well.
Yeah, that's cool. Why do you think you were more successful than some of the other agents?
Well, I used to get into the office at sort of 7:45 in the morning. I'd probably leave there 8:30 at night. I was up against it a bit because of what had happened the previous 18 months, and with my business and still paying school fees and bits and pieces. So, I had to do it. And the timing was lucky that 2010 was a good year, but I certainly made the most of it and learnt a lot. And the only reason I moved was the other company were more sort of London based, if you like, and there was a lot of buyers coming out of London looking in Surrey where I worked. So It was just a sort of a slightly higher branded estate agency, and that appealed to me at the time. But I enjoyed it. Cool. They let me get on with things, and that was it, really.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And it's having that success is a reason to stay in that kind of industry and with those types of companies. So how did you get from to there to going back to owning your own business, bearing in mind the kind of fluctuations in the industry could potentially have an impact?
So I ended up spending 9 years at the second estate agency that I was at, and ended up managing that branch after I was there for a year. And we then had Brexit, and obviously the market turned a little bit, and the company or the network were having some issues with different bits and pieces, and I was offered redundancy and thought that it might be the launch pad for me to finally go back on my own and do it for myself. I'd been through it with the mortgage business, so I knew what the downside was, and so started on my own at the end of summer 2019.
Yeah, wow. And we all kind of know now what was on the horizon at that point, but was that something that was were you aware of what was going on at that time, or was it earlier on in the year?
No, to the end of 2019, I just started on my own. I sold my first property in the October, which completed in December 2019. So that sort of gave me some income there. It was quite a good sized house. And up to that Christmas, there were a few reports at the end of 2019 about this illness in China and that sort of thing. But then we started the new year. I took on a couple of other properties, which I managed to get agreed sales on both of them. And as each week went past, it seemed to be getting worse and worse, this news coming out of China. And I just managed to complete on the second house that I sold when we were then told it was sort of lockdown and you can't work anymore. So luckily I had some income come in, but it was a worrying time.
Yeah.
You have no one else to rely on, and it was a worrying time, but luckily we got through it.
Yeah. So this is this new business then. You actually invested in a franchise business called Propertynest. That's right, isn't it? So
That's right.
So it's estate agency, from what I can see, similar to what you were doing before. You said you wanted to do something different. So yeah, why invest in a business that's in that similar kind of area, really?
Well, I think as one, you have to enjoy what you do, and as long as you enjoy what you do, then you just look at the best options that are available to you. If you want to come out of that comfort blanket of a basic salary and pension and stuff that a big company provides. And I'd known Vincent for a little while at Propertynest. He had a separate business that was building websites and things. And when I wanted a website done, lots of companies were telling me I needed to pay X amount of pounds up front and sign this, that, and the other paperwork. And Vincent just said to me, "No, Doug," he said, I can do your website. He said, "See if you're happy with it, and then we can sort out payment and stuff." I thought, wow, that's refreshing. And then when he contacted me to say that they'd started up the Propertynest franchise, it was more about working with him than it was specifically Propertynest. But
right.
I did like his vision for the future. I loved his honesty. I loved the way that he looked after me without trying to tie me down to stuff that other companies were. And, the biggest house I've ever sold, which was over 4 million, was done on a handshake. So I work that way quite a lot. That to me, if you shake hands, it's a deal, and that I like working that way. And Vincent struck me as that sort of character that you could trust, and that meant more to me than anything, really.
Yeah, that's quite powerful, really, isn't it? That element of trust, because I guess beyond marriage and moving house, it's kind of the next biggest thing that you can invest your time and money into, because your last business, you were saying 6 years of time invested into it, right? So it's going to be similar for any other business you start up. So trust is a really powerful thing. But I still think there's got to be an element of, you could see this business is going to be successful because of something else, right? There's got to be some facts, figures, numbers, something, I guess, a little bit more concrete, maybe, that you can kind of look at and refer to and say, yeah, I can see how this makes sense. So what was there that you kind of saw that made you feel comfortable in handing over, a franchise fee at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, I think when I very first started, the first 6 months, I went direct through Rightmove and Zoopla. Yeah. So that costs quite a bit of money itself. So to then because of the pandemic and everything else, that I could not afford to continue going down that route and not knowing how long the pandemic was going to last and everything else. So I thought, right, what are the other options? And it is either joining a network or going down the route of having my own territory and that sort of thing. And because I'd known Vincent, that was the route that I took. And franchise fees and things like that are considerable, but I had already been spending out quite considerable sums anyway.
Yeah.
To the big websites and stuff out there. And I think the big thing was with Propertynest was that Vincent had the marketing suite ready. So things like stationery, flyers, brochures, that sort of stuff was all there. And for someone like me, when you're working on your own, time is so valuable. And if I can go to a franchise and have everything there, so a few clicks of a button, and then the following day my stationery arrives or my flyers arrive, it saves me hours and hours and hours. And that really, really helps. And coupled with the fact of the trust with Vincent and his vision for where he sees Propertynest, it was exciting.
I can understand and relate to a lot of that, actually. So I think so I was in recruitment for a good number of years, and at one point I looked at, well, what if I just did this on my own? And I know that actually I couldn't get the same deal the company I was working for at that moment in time was getting, because they could buy in bulk. They could buy 50 advertisements across, how long the contract was for. If I tried to do that, well, it wasn't going to happen, because I didn't need 50 adverts. And so the cost became just almost as expensive just for 10 adverts. And once you start stacking those things up, it doesn't make sense. But the marketing collateral piece as well, I kind of naively thought, that's a doddle. Like so this is more recently in starting my own business, because I do graphic design, and I was like, it's not that bad at all. But it's not just the creation of it, you have to think about every single element of it. What colors are you going to use? What's the font going to look like? And how does that represent you? Okay, what do I actually need to create? How much text needs to go on there? What imagery? What kind of feel do I want the brand to have? So whilst, it might not take that long to produce a leaflet design, coming up with all those elements beforehand actually is really time consuming and stressful, and an opportunity to get things wrong, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think the other thing is that it's not only the time, but as I had already experienced with trying to get a website done, there are so many companies out there that you want to speak to, but they're all charging you different amounts for doing different things. And you can spend days trying to search stuff out. And I don't have the time to spend that period of my life, looking at every single little thing. So having the bits that Propertynest provide all there ready for me has saved me weeks and weeks and weeks of me running around trying to do it myself. And that's a big benefit.
That translates into money for you as well, really, doesn't it?
100%.
Because it's live off the redundancy money while you're doing that, or have the opportunity to get going straight away and start to, give yourself the chance to earn quicker, I guess, isn't it? So that's good. So obviously you started it before the pandemic. What was it like during, and how is it now? Because I think, just from an outsider's perspective, a brand that can go through and survive something as debilitating as COVID, they must be doing something right. But even still, how did you kind of survive through those years, months?
It was really tough, Ed. It was a challenge, because at the time, I didn't know how long we were going to be locked down for, what was going to happen. It really was a panic to a degree. And I was confident. I'd taken properties on, I'd sold properties, so I knew I could do it. I think the biggest downside for me at the time was that as soon as we got the lockdown was lifted, because the government then had the stamp duty bonus, every property that then came onto the market just sold straight away. And I hadn't had the time to market myself or whatever. So, all these properties were coming on and just selling immediately. The market just went crazy. So that was probably more frustrating than actually the lockdown itself, because I hadn't had the time to market myself fully. And then the pandemic changed people's perceptions of how they wanted to live, and all these properties were coming on each week and selling within a couple of days, and no one really knew about me. So it was it was again a big learning curve. I'm always quite positive about what I learned from each situation, and that was something. And everyone used to say to me, look, you've come through the pandemic, just keep at it, and you need the support of family, friends, and the belief in yourself to get through stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And what sort of support were you receiving from Vincent?
He would always ring me. He was always there calling me up, and we used to chat about things and what's happening and what we think would happen, what we were going to do or what I was going to do when lockdown ended. And I think, again, it's a bit like, my previous jobs being in people's houses talking about their mortgages and things. It's having somebody to talk to who understands where you are. Vincent had started his own business with Propertynest, and he'd been through it, and it was tough, but it certainly helped having him there to speak to and discuss things with. He was always a source of encouragement for sure.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And the business today, how's it doing?
It's been amazing. I always look at it as progression. Do I want to be up here? Of course I do, but I realize that takes time. So I came into this year, I've got some great instructions coming on. I've been out to a property on Monday, which is an absolutely incredible home, which is coming on with me. And, last year I came into January, I didn't really have anything. It was back looking for instructions. So last year was a great year in terms of income. And this year, I just need to keep that ball rolling and, just get my name out there more, do more on social media, and, stick at it. That's the main thing.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, in terms of your business, then in your setup, you don't have an office, do you? So, it's not like someone's going to walk past. But do people sort of trust estate agents that work from home, in your opinion?
I think so now. I mean, when I was managing my high street branch, we probably had 2 people a month would walk in.
Oh, wow.
It's just, I used to work in a branch many years ago when I first started, and it was the busiest branch in the network. And you would have 6 negotiators that would all be sat with potential buyers, but nothing was on the internet then. They had to come in and pick up property details and stuff, whereas now everything's changed. And I think people realise that Rightmove, Zoopla, etc., are your shop window. And I always ask people, when was the last time you walked into an estate agent's? And most people, if they're younger, never. and even if they're older, it was 10 years ago or something like that. So I don't think it's something that worries people now. I think people realise the power of these property portals and the internet, and everything's there. So it's certainly not held me back.
So that then leads me on to the kind of the next question, really, and that is, with the likes of Purple Bricks out there offering low rates and what seems to be a great service where you don't have to get too kind of into the details. Why would someone use someone like yourself as opposed to a click and I don't know what the next word to it is, but just click and sell, maybe. Click and advertise on your own.
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think firstly, it's great for the consumer that there is so much choice out there. If you're the sort of homeowner now that is happy to do your own viewings and pay money up front, it's fantastic that you've got the option to do that if you want to. The only thing I would say is that I remember seeing a TV program when this sort of low fees type agency came out, and it showed a property that had come on actually in my area, which was why it sticks in my mind. But the property came on, they had some buyers round, and they didn't end up selling it. They reduced the price, and then 3 buyers came in. And the lady presenting the show, they then said to the owners, well, how much did you end up with? And they said, well, we got the asking price. And I'm sat there thinking, you've had 3 people offer you the asking price, and that's all you've achieved. You should be able to work those buyers up and probably gain a hell of a lot more than the £2,000 fee that you've saved by going with a as you call it, a click and whatever agent. It's horses for courses. And I think for me, if you want somebody who is going to be available 7 days a week, really understand what you're going through, realize that your property is not just where you live, it's your home, it's your memories, it's your concerns about what the future holds. I understand all that. I've been through it. And I'm always there to help my clients every step of the way. And I say to everybody, if my mobile is on, I'm working. So it doesn't matter. But I think you get what you pay for to a degree. And I try and offer good value.
See, I offered that question with my own opinions, and because I looked at it in the past, doing that because feel I could do it okay, come from a sales background and thought, well, doesn't seem too complicated.
Yeah.
I now know a lot more about what things seeming to be simple are like in reality, but why I didn't end up using a company like Purple Bricks in the end was actually because it's just time. Actually, it's just it's same as starting this business. You've got to make a decision on all the different little elements. Am I writing the text that goes with it as in the most attractive format? I don't know. It could work for recruitment, but does it work? The same for selling a house? Probably not, right? But then you finger in the airtime, trying to work out, the price of things, and taking your own photograph. It all adds up just to being time, which depends on how you value your time. But I think it's the most important currency in the world. It just makes more sense to pass it on to somebody else who knows what they're doing, as long as you've got that trust there to get on and do it for you.
Yeah. As I said, I think it's great to have that option for the people that want it. But I think ultimately when you're dealing in tens of thousands of pounds, and sometimes you're saving 2,000 or 3,000 and you're paying that money up front. So what's the incentive for an agent that does that to then get you even more money? I don't know. But if that's what people want, then it's great that the option's there for them.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So, in terms of, so final question really before I jump into my last three questions. I just wondered, how long did it take you to kind of start up? Because with some franchise brands, you've got to find a property. So you pay the fee, then you go and find your property, then you go through training, and then, and it could be 6 months before you start trading and actually having the opportunity to start earning money. What has it been like for you with Propertynest?
Probably been different for me, purely because of what I've been through in terms of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I think if I put that to one side, I think you certainly need to look at 6 months to get yourself fully embedded into what you need to do and have everything done and ready. Whether that's your marketing, how you're going to go about your own business, where you're going to target. If you've planned all of that out beforehand, then fine, and you know what you're doing, then fine, you can pretty much jump in and get going straight away, as I did. But I think if you're coming into this new, then you've certainly got to allow yourself 6 months, in my opinion, to get yourself sorted and think, right, I need to plan this properly. But yeah, probably 6 months, I would say.
Do you mean in terms of before you can start earning revenue, or?
Yeah, because I think, I started in the beginning of September. I had my first sale agreed at the end of October, which then completed literally the day before Christmas, in effect. So that's your sort of 4 months. And I knew what I was doing. I managed to get a property on very quickly. For some people, it may take them, a couple of months just to get their name out there and get someone to say, well, okay, I'll give you a try. But that comes into the planning stage before you make the jump. Is, do you know friends, relatives, friends of friends, people at the gym who would trust you to sell their home for them, and do whatever you can to plan accordingly and hit the ground running.
Yeah. So in terms of actually starting the business, though, is it day one? I mean, in terms of, to be able to start marketing what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything restricts you. I think, everything is there with regards to Propertynest for you to get going straight away. So, they take you through everything that you need, and they're always happy to run through that. So as you're fully aware of what is required before you start. So you shouldn't be jumping into something and then finding out that you need to do this, you need to do that. So that would be a big bit of advice. I would say speak to someone, Propertynest or whoever, but find out exactly what you need in place before you actually start. Because once you start and your bills start coming in, that's when the pressure comes. So do as much research and everything else as you can beforehand.
Awesome. So final three questions then for you. And the first one is one of my favorites, because we get some good stories come from this. And that is, are there any funny, strange or weird stories from your career that you're happy to share?
Probably the one that always sticks in my mind was when I was had my own mortgage company that we spoke about earlier. And I came out of a house one evening, and there was an old lady by the next door neighbour's front wall. And she said to me, can you just go into this house? She said, I'm trying to get hold of Mr. Bloggs or whatever. She said, but he's not answering and the door's open, but I don't want to go in. So I said, okay. She said, look, he's an older gentleman and I'm afraid something might have happened.
Right.
So I crept into the house, and unfortunately, the chap had passed away and was on the floor,
Oh no.
in the bedroom, on the bedroom floor. So you don't have things like that happen to you every day, but yeah. So
Yeah. Wow. That's a
bit
difficult
different.
situation to deal with, isn't it? Crikey.
But yeah, it was yeah, pretty strange. So
Yeah, that's to not say
I
about
don't know
it, but
what to say
it's
to
very,
that.
yeah, it's very odd, isn't it? Like to have
Yeah,
that in your, what other kind of walk of life are you likely to have that happen? There's not
I
too
know.
many, is there? And
I know. Very quite. I wasn't expecting that to finish the day off. That was for sure.
no, and I'm not surprised it stuck with you for this all this time,
Yeah.
right? So, crikey. So, okay, well let's move on to something maybe more positive. So, it'd be good to hear from you. What's been your proudest or most inspiring moment in your career again?
I think there's quite a few things actually. I think transferring from, when I was at the mortgage company, I had to go through all the regulatory exams and stuff there, and I did additional exams which I didn't need to take, but I just wanted to be the best that I could be there. Selling my first property when I started on my own,
Yeah,
that's probably a big thing because it was the second time of trying the self-employed route. There was pressure to do it, obviously financially, and getting that first one done and then going through the whole process, from taking a property on to it completing on your own with new software and everything. It makes you feel as though, yeah, I can do this on my own. I don't need everybody. So that was a big moment for sure.
that's
Um,
cool.
but
Is it, do you think that that monetary pressure kind of helps or hinders? Especially when we're talking about a franchise fee, and it can be sizable, depending on the brand.
yeah,
But yeah,
for
some
someone
people
like,
see it as a negative, but I think the more I speak to people, it could potentially be a positive. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
yeah, for me, it's a positive. But this is where in my humble opinion, you really need to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself that question. If I've got financial worries, am I going to perform better or worse than if I didn't have financial worries? And for me, it's a bit like we spoke about, when I first changed from being a mortgage broker to an estate agent, and I was in the office at 7:30 in the morning and I didn't leave till 8:30 at night. My business had just collapsed as a mortgage broker, and I had to have the money. So, you know, timing then in 2010 helped, but having that financial pressure for me is a positive. It's
Yeah,
you've got to get out there. You have no choice.
yeah. No, interesting. So on to our final question then, and that is, if you were sitting in front of somebody now who's potentially going to invest in a franchise business, whether it's Propertynest or any other business out there, and you're only allowed to give them one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say that they need to plan ahead, do as much research as they can, plan ahead, and be honest with themselves. Does that count as one bit of advice? Probably three.
I'll let you have it. It's all right.
But yeah, be honest with yourself. Don't imagine everything's going to be rosy, and it's a challenge for most people. So be prepared. Be prepared.
Yeah. What sort of things do you think people should plan for?
I think everything that, a bit like me, would I have planned for a global pandemic and national lockdown?
Yeah.
Never in a million years. But that's what happened. So, you know, ultimately, would it have changed me if someone had said, Doug, this is what's going to happen? I probably wouldn't have started on my own. But, looking back now, I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I guess you can plan for the unexpected to some degree, but not on that scale. It's a bit too
A
tough,
lot
isn't
of
it?
it, Ed, is financial. If you're coming home every night, I enjoy what I do. I love it. But if you're coming home every night, you've got red bills coming through the door and this sort of thing, you're going to struggle. So make sure that your financial planning and everything else is in place, that you're not going to hit those sorts of scenarios within your first 6 months at least. Make sure you've got the money there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice. So before we get more than one piece of advice out of you, I'm going to stop things there and say, Doug, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, getting to know your story, and I'm glad things are going well for you since the pandemic, and hopefully they continue to do so. So thank you again for your time, Doug.
That's all right. It's been my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ed. Bye-bye.